I was finally relaxing by my own pool when Karen's spoiled son stormed over and shouted, "You can't be here." He had no clue it was my property, or that I'm the county sheriff. When the HOA tried to back him up, they ended up learning the hard way what real law enforcement looks like. Stick around to see how the HOA's empire collapsed overnight, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more wild HOA justice stories. It was one of those perfect Sundays that felt almost too good to be true. The kind of day where the sky is a bright, endless blue, the air carries that lazy hum of sprinklers and cicadas, and the smell of sizzling burgers fills the neighborhood. I'd just finished mowing the lawn that morning and decided I'd earned a reward, an afternoon with no phone calls, no paperwork, and absolutely no one knocking on my door. I set my badge on the kitchen counter, hung up my uniform, and stepped outside in shorts and a faded county sheriff's t-shirt. The patio stones were warm under my bare feet, and the water in my pool shimmered like liquid glass. After a week full of domestic disputes, speeding tickets, and an overly dramatic lost cat incident that somehow involved 3 patrol units, all I wanted was peace. And that's exactly what I thought I was getting. For about 5 minutes. I stretched out on the deck chair, the smell of grilled chicken drifting from my smoker, and closed my eyes. The faint laughter of kids playing a few houses down mixed with the low hum of the pool filter, a small reminder that life could still be simple sometimes. Then, cutting through the calm like nails on a chalkboard, came a voice. Loud. Sharp. Arrogant. "Hey. You can't be here." At first, I thought it was a joke. Maybe a neighbor calling out to one of their kids. But the voice was close. Too close. I opened my eyes and turned toward the fence. Standing at the edge of my yard, half blocking the sun with his obnoxious posture, was a teenage boy I'd only seen a few times around the neighborhood. Karen's son. Chad. Even from across the pool, he radiated that spoiled confidence that only comes from growing up thinking rules don't apply to you. He was wearing designer sunglasses, a bright neon tank top, and holding his phone like it was an extension of his ego. He looked down at me like he was some kind of authority figure. "This pool is private property," he announced, his voice dripping with attitude. "My mom says only HOA-approved members can use it." I blinked at him, confused, then laughed under my breath. "Kid, this is my pool." But Chad wasn't backing down. He crossed his arms, smirked, and tilted his head like he'd just caught a criminal. "Yeah, right. We'll see about that." I could tell by his tone that he wasn't kidding. He believed, really believed, that he had some kind of power here. I stood up, water dripping from my feet, and walked over to the fence. "You live in the house across the street, right? You're Karen's kid?" "Yeah," he said proudly. "And my mom's the HOA president. She runs this whole community. That means this pool's part of HOA property." I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. "You think my backyard pool belongs to the HOA?" He shrugged, smug as ever. "That's what my mom said. She knows all the rules." I let out a slow sigh and tried to keep my cool. "Listen, I think you've got it mixed up. The HOA pool's 2 streets over, next to the clubhouse. This is private property, mine. See that fence? That's the property line." Chad scoffed like he'd just been told Santa wasn't real. "My mom said everything inside the neighborhood belongs to the HOA. You're breaking the rules." I couldn't help but laugh. "Kid, I paid for this house, I pay the taxes, and I built that pool myself. Your mom doesn't own a drop of water in it." He frowned, clearly not used to being told he was wrong. "You shouldn't talk to me like that. My mom's gonna hear about this." "Good," I said, crossing my arms. "Tell her I said hi." He glared at me, pulling out his phone like it was a weapon. "I'm recording this. Just so you know." I chuckled. "Go ahead. Make sure you get my good side." He started filming, walking around the edge of the fence as if he were documenting a crime scene. "Caught another trespasser," he said into the camera. "He's using the HOA pool without permission. We'll handle this." "Unbelievable," I muttered under my breath. Then he turned and shouted across the street. "MOM. There's a stranger in the pool." "Oh, fantastic. Here we go." Within seconds, I heard the unmistakable slam of a screen door. The sound of heels clicking across pavement echoed through the afternoon. And sure enough, here came Karen herself. Mid-50s, hair perfectly sprayed into a stiff blonde helmet, oversized sunglasses perched like a crown, and that ever-present clipboard in hand. The woman looked like she ran a Fortune 500 company, not a suburban cul-de-sac. She marched right up my driveway like she owned the place. "Sir," she started, her voice sharp and authoritative, "what exactly do you think you're doing?" I turned slowly, already exhausted. "Enjoying my Sunday. On my property." "This pool," she said, tapping her clipboard like it gave her authority, "is part of the neighborhood's shared amenities. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I report you to the board." I stared at her for a moment, trying to figure out if this was a prank. "Karen, this is my house. I bought it last month. The pool came with it." She frowned, scanning the yard like she was searching for proof. "That's impossible. The Harrisons owned this house, and they were HOA members in good standing." "They sold it," I replied evenly. "To me. Sheriff Daniel Blake." That made her pause, but only for a moment. "I don't recall approving a Daniel Blake. You'll need to submit your residency documents before using community facilities." I exhaled sharply. "Once again, this is my private pool. You can't just walk onto someone's property and claim it belongs to your HOA." Karen lifted her chin. "I most certainly can if it's within HOA boundaries." I looked at her son, still smirking behind his phone. "Boundaries, huh? Maybe you two should check a map before you start yelling at people." Her lips tightened. "There's no need to be rude. I'm simply enforcing the rules." I smiled, a slow, patient kind of smile that only comes from years of dealing with stubborn people. "Karen, you might want to check who you're trying to enforce them on." She raised an eyebrow. "And what's that supposed to mean?" I just shrugged. "You'll find out soon enough." And with that, I sat back down by the pool, dipped my feet into the cool water again, and pretended not to notice her furious glare. Because in this neighborhood, peace was always temporary. And something told me, this was only the beginning. The next 5 minutes felt like I was starring in a bad reality show called When HOAs Attack. Karen stood there, blocking the sunlight, clutching her clipboard like it was a weapon. Chad still had his phone out, recording every second, mumbling commentary as if he were live streaming to an audience that actually cared. I could see the glint of satisfaction in Karen's eyes. She lived for moments like this, little bursts of manufactured power. I'd seen her type before in my line of work, people who thought a title gave them the right to boss everyone around. "Let's get one thing straight," I said, standing up slowly. "This is my pool on my land. You and your son are trespassing." Karen scoffed so loud it nearly drowned out the hum of the pool filter. "Don't be ridiculous. This neighborhood follows HOA regulations. You may think you own this property, but the HOA has oversight of all structures and shared amenities." I raised an eyebrow. "Shared amenities? Karen, you're standing in my backyard." She flipped a page on her clipboard like she was citing a law book. "Rule 12B, all visible outdoor facilities, including pools, pergolas and fencing, are subject to HOA review and approval. You'll have to provide proof of authorization for this installation." I couldn't help but laugh. "Authorization? You're talking about a pool that's been here for over 15 years. I bought the property with it." Karen's expression soured. "If it was never approved, that makes it a violation. We can fine you, or even remove it." That made me pause. "Remove it?" I stared at her, trying to decide if she was serious. And from the look in her eyes, she absolutely was. Chad grinned, still recording. "Told you, dude. You're in trouble now." I exhaled, rubbing my forehead. "You really think you can walk into someone's yard and order them to drain their pool because it's not up to your HOA's imaginary code?" Karen crossed her arms. "You can cooperate, or we'll take it up with the board. I'm sure they'll agree that unauthorized property modifications can't stand." Her confidence was almost impressive. "Almost." "Karen," I said slowly, "I think you're making a big mistake." "Oh, am I?" she snapped. "You don't know how things work here, newcomer. I've been the president of this HOA for 8 years. I built this community's reputation." I nodded thoughtfully. "And I'm sure you've made a lot of friends along the way." That jab landed. Her jaw tightened, and I caught a flicker of something, insecurity maybe? But she recovered fast. "Enough," she said, motioning for her son. Chad, keep recording. We'll need this for evidence. Evidence of what? I asked, incredulous. Me, sitting by my pool? She smirked. Evidence of non-compliance. At that point, I couldn't decide if she was delusional or just addicted to drama. I walked over to the gate, unlatched it, and gestured politely. Well, since you're so certain of your rules, maybe you can show me the part where it says HOA officials are allowed to trespass on private land without permission. She froze, clearly not expecting me to push back. This isn't trespassing. We're conducting an inspection. Without notice or consent. I asked. That's a problem. You should know that. Her chin lifted, and she tried to sound calm. If you continue to resist, I'll be forced to issue a citation. Go ahead, I said, deadpan. Make sure you spell my name right. For a brief second, she looked confused. Then her eyes narrowed. You think this is funny, don't you? I shrugged. I think it's ridiculous. Chad suddenly raised his phone higher, narrating again. Man refuses to leave the pool after HOA warning. This is going viral. I shot him a flat look. Careful, son. You're filming on private property. That's not legal without consent. He hesitated, glancing at his mom. Karen snapped, keep filming. He can't stop you, this is community space. I laughed again, louder this time. Community space? You're standing next to my grill, and my dog's water bowl's right there. Do you really think this belongs to the HOA? Karen ignored me, typing something onto her clipboard. We'll be in touch about your fine. Until then, stay off the pool. It's officially closed. I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm but firm. Karen, let me give you some friendly advice. You're way out of line. I know the rules, she hissed. So do I replied, my tone dropping just slightly. And believe me, you don't want to test how far those rules can bend. Her eyes flickered, but before she could respond, Chad tugged her sleeve. Mom, let's just go. He's weird. Quiet, Chad, she snapped. We're doing our duty as community leaders. I sighed, crossing my arms. You're trespassing and harassing a homeowner. If I were you, I'd rethink this whole act before it gets you into real trouble. Her head tilted. Are you threatening me? I smiled faintly. No. Just giving you a warning, free of charge. That finally got under her skin. She stepped back, glaring at me like I'd insulted her entire bloodline. You'll regret this, she said. When the board gets my report, you'll be fined for every single day you use this pool. I'll take my chances, I replied. She spun on her heel, storming off toward the street with Chad trailing behind, still muttering something into his phone about documenting a violation. As they disappeared, I shook my head and sat back down in my chair. The grill still smoked beside me, the smell of seared chicken wafting into the air, but the peace was gone. In its place was a slow, creeping irritation, not because they'd accused me of anything serious, but because of their audacity. I'd seen people misuse authority before, judges, councilmen, even officers, but seeing it in a homeowners association? That was a new low. And the worst part? I had a feeling this wasn't over. Sure enough, as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number popped up. You have been reported to the HOA for unauthorized pool usage. A formal hearing will be scheduled. I chuckled, shaking my head. All right, Karen. You want to play this game? I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of iced tea, and muttered to myself, you picked the wrong backyard this time. Because if Karen and her spoiled son thought they could bully their way into my property rights, they were about to find out exactly who they were messing with, the county sheriff. And I don't play games when it comes to the law. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my doorbell ringing. Not once. Not twice. But 7 times in rapid succession. That kind of impatient, self-important ring that only one person in this neighborhood was capable of. Karen. I sighed, pulled on a t-shirt, and checked the clock. 8:06 a.m. on a Monday. Perfect. I hadn't even had coffee yet. When I opened the door, there she was, standing ramrod straight, clutching her infamous clipboard like it was a sacred tablet. Her sunglasses were perched high on her head, and behind her stood Chad, chewing gum like he was guarding the White House. "Good morning," she said, though there was nothing good about her tone. "We need to discuss the violations your property is currently under." I rubbed my temple. "Karen, it's 8 in the morning. And you've already been issued a notice," she continued, ignoring me entirely. "Failure to comply may result in escalating fines and—" "Hold on," I interrupted. "What notice?" With a triumphant little smile, she pulled a paper from her clipboard and waved it in front of me. "This. Delivered last night." I took the paper. It was a printed HOA violation form, complete with her signature at the bottom. The reason? Unauthorized pool installation and improper use of community amenities. I couldn't help it, I laughed out loud. "Karen, you're kidding me." Her lips tightened. "This is no joke, Mr. Blake. You're in violation of HOA Policy 4B and subsection 12C. You can't simply claim personal ownership of what is considered shared property." "Shared property," I repeated, pointing over my shoulder. "Karen, that pool is in my backyard. You can't get more personal than that." She raised her chin. "That's yet to be verified. According to our property database, the boundaries may include easements that place that pool within HOA authority." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my patience. "Karen, have you even looked at the county property maps?" Chad snorted. "Yeah, right. Like you know anything about property law." That one made me grin. "Actually, kid, I know a lot about it. Comes with the job." Karen shot him a glare, then turned back to me. "Regardless, we'll be holding a hearing this Thursday at the clubhouse. Attendance is mandatory." "Mandatory," I repeated. "For what? Owning my own home?" She ignored the sarcasm. "At the meeting, you'll have a chance to plead your case before the board. I'd recommend bringing any relevant documentation, proof of ownership, permits, that sort of thing. We'll be fair." Fair. Coming from Karen, that word might as well have meant pre-decided. I folded the paper and slid it into my pocket. "You know, Karen, you're playing a dangerous game here. You can't just issue fake citations. I assure you, these are entirely legitimate." "No," I said firmly, "they're not. You're overstepping your authority." Her voice hardened. "Authority is given to the HOA through the signed covenant you agreed to when purchasing your property." I leaned against the doorframe. "Funny thing, Karen, I bought this house directly from the Harrisons. The HOA covenant expired 2 years ago when the community failed to renew it. This property isn't even under your jurisdiction anymore." That wiped the smugness right off her face. She blinked, lips parting slightly. "That's impossible. Every property in this neighborhood is bound by HOA regulations." "Not mine," I said evenly. "You'd know that if you checked public records instead of acting like you run a small country." For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then her face hardened again. "We'll see what the board says." She turned sharply on her heel, calling over her shoulder, "Come along, Chad." But Chad didn't move. He was staring at me curiously, like he was finally realizing maybe, just maybe, his mom wasn't as all-powerful as she claimed. "Chad," she snapped again. Yeah, he muttered, pocketing his phone before following her down the driveway. I watched them go, shaking my head. I'd seen stubborn people before, but Karen was on a whole different level. She was determined to make a mountain out of a puddle, and I could already tell she wasn't going to stop until she embarrassed herself. Later that day, I decided to pay a quick visit to City Hall. I knew the property records like the back of my hand, but I wanted printed proof, something I could drop in front of Karen's precious board like a hammer. The clerk at the property office smiled when I walked in. "Morning, Sheriff. Need something?" "Yeah," I said. "Printout of 228 Maple Crest Drive. Full record, current ownership, boundary lines, and easement details." She typed for a few seconds, then handed me a stapled packet. "Still under your name. No HOA covenants active. Everything's clean." "Thanks," I said, sliding it into a folder. When I got home, I saw something that made my blood pressure spike. Karen was back. Again. This time she wasn't alone. 2 other HOA board members were standing beside her, both wearing matching polo shirts with the HOA logo stitched on the chest. They were taking photos of my yard. I stepped outside. You folks lost. Karen turned, startled but trying to act composed. We're conducting a preliminary inspection. Without notice? On private property? I said, walking toward the fence. Under HOA authority, she said briskly, we have the right to document violations at any time. Not on private land, you don't. Her expression faltered again. This is part of community oversight. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't object. Oh, I don't have anything to hide, I said, pulling the folder from under my arm. But I do have something to show. I opened it and held up the document. Official record from the county. Property boundary clearly marked. You see that line? That's where your authority ends. And everything on this side belongs to me. One of the board members looked uncomfortable. Karen, maybe we should verify this before. Karen cut him off. No, he's misinterpreting it. We'll handle this at the hearing. I grinned. Good idea. I'll bring this copy, and maybe someone from the sheriff's department to make sure you don't inspect any more private property without permission. That shut her up. She turned red, muttered something about procedural fairness, and marched off again, dragging the board members with her. As they disappeared down the street, I caught Chad standing by their SUV, glaring at me like I'd insulted his entire family. He muttered, "You'll regret messing with my mom." I smirked. Kid, if your mom keeps this up, she's the one who'll regret it. He didn't reply. Just climbed into the car, and they drove off. As soon as they were gone, I leaned against the fence, exhaled, and said to myself, this isn't about a pool anymore. It's about power. And Karen wasn't ready to lose hers. Not yet. I thought after showing Karen the official property documents, she'd finally back off. But with people like her, logic is just background noise, something they pretend to hear while already planning their next move. The very next morning, I walked outside to grab the newspaper, and what do I find? A big, bold orange notice taped to my mailbox. In thick capital letters, it read, "Notice of violation. Unauthorized pool construction and unsanctioned use of HOA property. Hearing required." I stared at it for a solid 10 seconds before bursting into laughter. She actually doubled down. Karen wasn't just being stubborn, she was going full-on dictator mode. I peeled the notice off, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. But as much as I wanted to ignore her nonsense, I knew letting it slide would just encourage her. She'd already crossed into harassment territory, and I needed to make sure she didn't drag the rest of the neighborhood into her little fantasy world. So, I decided to play along. If she wanted a hearing, I'd give her one. That Thursday evening, I put on a clean button-up shirt, grabbed my folder of property records, and headed down to the clubhouse. The HOA meetings were usually a circus, but tonight, it was standing room only. Word had spread fast. Apparently Karen had told half the community that a rogue homeowner had illegally built a pool on shared land. People love drama, and Karen was their ringleader. As I stepped inside, conversations hushed. Some folks smiled at me politely, others looked away, probably afraid to pick sides. At the far end of the room, under a framed sign that said Maple Crest Homeowners Association, protecting our community, sat Karen at a long table, flanked by 3 board members. She was dressed like she was about to conduct a court hearing, blazer, pearls, and that same smug expression she'd worn since the day I moved in. She tapped her pen against her clipboard as I walked up. "Mr. Blake," she said with that fake sweet tone. "So nice of you to attend." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, taking a seat near the front. Her son, Chad, was sitting in the back, arms crossed and smirking like he thought this was going to be a public execution. Karen adjusted her papers and cleared her throat. "This hearing has been called to address a violation concerning the unauthorized installation and private use of a swimming pool located on what appears to be community-managed property." I raised a hand. "Before we go further, Karen, you do realize this pool has existed for 15 years, right? Built and approved long before you even joined the HOA." She smiled condescendingly. "That's what we're here to determine." The first board member, a nervous-looking man in a golf polo, leaned forward. "According to our map, there's some ambiguity about where the property line ends. The pool may technically extend a few feet into community land." "Ambiguity?" I echoed, pulling a folded map from my folder. "Funny, because the county assessor doesn't seem to think so." I spread it across the table. The paper still smelled faintly of printer ink. Here's the official boundary map, with GPS coordinates, registered and stamped 2 weeks ago. That red line? That's my fence, well within my property. Karen's pen stopped mid-tap. The second board member, a woman in her 60s, adjusted her glasses and squinted. That does look legitimate. It is legitimate, I said. You can call the county clerk's office if you'd like confirmation. Karen's smile faltered for just a moment, then snapped back into place like a mask. Well, even if that's the case, your pool may still be in violation of HOA aesthetic standards. The color of your tiles and the deck layout don't match the community's uniform design. I stared at her, half expecting someone to laugh. No one did. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. You're holding a formal hearing because you don't like the color of my pool tiles? Karen's chin lifted proudly. Rules are rules. A few neighbors in the back chuckled. One whispered, "She's really losing it." I took a deep breath and forced a smile. Karen, I think it's time you stopped pretending this is about rules. You've been harassing me since the day I moved in. Trespassing on my property. Making false claims. Posting fake fines. I could file half a dozen complaints against you right now, legal ones. Her eyes widened slightly, and I could see her pulse flicker at her neck. Are you threatening me? She said, her voice rising. I'm stating facts, I replied calmly. You've crossed several legal boundaries, and I've been patient. But patience runs out eventually. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The golf shirt board member coughed awkwardly. Maybe we should table this issue until we verify the boundaries, Karen snapped. No. We're not tabling anything. She slammed her clipboard down. This man has been disrespectful and disruptive since the moment he moved in. He refuses to follow our guidelines. A voice from the audience piped up. Guidelines or your personal opinions, Karen? It was Mrs. Carter, the elderly widow who lived 3 houses down. She folded her arms, glaring. You tried to fine me for having a red mailbox. We all know how you operate. A few people murmured in agreement. Karen's composure cracked. This meeting is not for open comments. Maybe it should be, someone else said. We're tired of your power trips. The room erupted into murmurs, then open arguments. Karen tried to shout over them, banging her pen on the table. Order. Order. She yelled, her face turning red. I sat back in my chair, arms folded, watching the chaos unfold. I didn't even have to say another word. She was self-destructing in front of everyone. Finally, one of the board members leaned toward her and whispered, Karen, let's adjourn. This isn't helping. Karen turned her glare toward me. Fine. But this isn't over, Mr. Blake. You've made a powerful enemy. I stood, gathering my folder. I'll take my chances. As I walked toward the exit, I caught Chad's glare from the back of the room. He mouthed something under his breath, something I didn't catch but didn't need to. The kid's ego was just a reflection of his mother's. Outside, the cool evening air hit my face, and I took a deep breath. Karen's empire was starting to crack. The board was splitting, the neighbors were finally standing up to her, and all I had to do was let her keep digging her own hole. But I had a feeling she wouldn't go quietly. Karen never did. And I was right, because the very next day, she took things to a whole new level. By the next morning, I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen had learned her lesson. The HOA meeting had been a disaster for her. The crowd turned against her, her authority cracked in front of everyone, and her precious clipboard might as well have been kindling for how little weight it carried anymore. But with people like Karen, losing control doesn't make them stop, it makes them dangerous. That's why the first thing that caught my attention the next day wasn't the sunshine or the smell of coffee brewing in my kitchen, it was the subtle wrongness in the air outside. When I stepped out onto my back patio, I noticed my pool gate was wide open. I always locked that gate. Then I saw muddy footprints on the deck, small, sneaker-sized prints, and a few leaves floating in the water like someone had been stomping around nearby. I crouched down, touching the prints. They were fresh. And then it hit me, Chad. The kid must have snuck in sometime during the night or early morning. Probably to inspect my pool for his mother's imaginary HOA violations. I sighed. Great. Junior's taking after mommy now. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. Sure enough, around 2:17 a.m., the night vision footage showed a lanky figure hopping the fence, flashlight in hand, sneaking toward my pool. He lingered near the patio for a minute before running off. I zoomed in. His face was fuzzy, but the backwards cap and ridiculous designer shoes gave him away. Chad. I pinched the bridge of my nose, half annoyed, half amused. Breaking and entering was a little more serious than slapping fake fines on someone's mailbox. Still, I didn't want to escalate it too quickly. Maybe the kid thought he was being clever, helping his mom. Or maybe he was trying to get revenge after her public humiliation last night. Either way, I'd handle it the way I handle every situation, calmly, methodically, and by the book. But that didn't mean I'd sit around waiting for the next stunt. I printed a few stills from the camera footage, dated and time-stamped, and slid them into my folder, just in case. Then I set up an alert system. If anyone crossed my property line again, I'd get a live notification on my phone. By late morning, I was outside trimming hedges when I noticed Karen standing across the street. She was pretending to talk on her phone, but her eyes were glued to me. The moment I looked up, she turned away, acting casual. She knew. Her kid got caught snooping, and now she was trying to gauge my reaction. I gave her a polite wave. "Morning, Karen." She froze mid-step, hesitated, and then mumbled something before heading back inside. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't done. She was regrouping. Around noon, a white SUV I didn't recognize rolled slowly past my house. Then again an hour later. Same car. Same tinted windows. No front plate. Coincidence? Maybe. But after a decade in law enforcement, you stop believing in coincidences. At 2 p.m., while reviewing reports in my home office, I got a text from a neighbor, Mike, the guy who lived 2 doors down. "Hey Sheriff, just FYI, Karen's been asking people if they can verify that your pool isn't compliant. Said she's gathering evidence." Sounds shady. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. The woman was doubling down again. I replied, "Thanks, Mike. If she asks you again, just smile and nod. I'll take care of it." Then, at exactly 4:23 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert from my backyard. I tapped the live feed. My heart rate didn't even change anymore. I'd almost expected it. There they were, Karen and Chad, standing inside my backyard, next to my pool, pointing at different areas with a clipboard and a tape measure. Unbelievable. I watched them for a moment, jaw tight. She was literally trespassing again, this time dragging her son into it, while being recorded in real time. I stepped outside quietly through the side door, circled around, and came up behind them. Karen was in full lecture mode, muttering about property boundaries and illegal modifications, while Chad filmed on his phone like he was part of a crime documentary. "Funny," I said calmly from behind them, "I didn't realize the HOA granted permission for midnight trespassing inspections." Karen spun around so fast her clipboard nearly flew out of her hands. "Oh. Sheriff, Mr. Blake, this isn't what it looks like." Chad lowered his phone slightly, his face turning red. I crossed my arms. "You're standing on my property, uninvited, filming my pool. You tell me what it looks like." Karen forced a laugh, her voice trembling. "I was just verifying some boundary discrepancies for the HOA. Purely procedural." "Procedural," I repeated. "So breaking and entering is part of the HOA bylaws now?" She stiffened, but before she could answer, I raised my hand and pointed to the corner of the yard. "You see that little box on the fence? That's a motion sensor linked to my security cameras. Everything you've done today is recorded, entry time, faces, even your conversation." Karen's face drained of color. Chad muttered, "Mom, we should go," but she snapped, "Quiet, Chad." Then she turned to me, trying to recover her usual bravado. "You can't threaten me with that. I'm doing my civic duty." "Civic duty?" I stepped closer, my tone even. "Karen, this is your second trespassing incident in less than 48 hours. You've already disrupted an HOA meeting, falsified notices, and now you're filming private property. I could have you charged right now." For once, she didn't have a comeback. Just a faint, shaky breath. I let the silence hang for a beat before adding, "But I'm going to give you one last warning. Leave my property. Stay off it. And tell your son to do the same. Next time, it's not going to be a friendly chat. It'll be a patrol car. Karen's jaw twitched, her eyes darting toward the cameras. She wanted to argue, but she knew she couldn't. Fine, she spat finally. But you haven't heard the last of this. She stormed out, dragging Chad by the wrist, muttering something about lawyer friends and misuse of power. I watched them leave, then pulled out my phone and saved the footage to a secure folder. As the evening sun dipped low, I leaned against the fence and exhaled. People like Karen always think they can bend rules until they snap back. She didn't realize I wasn't just some homeowner she could bully. I was the law in this county, and I was done playing nice. What I didn't know, though, was that this was only the calm before the storm. Because the next day, Karen wouldn't just try to inspect my property again, she'd try to seize it. The morning after Karen's inspection, I woke up to the sound of hammering. At first, I thought it was construction somewhere down the street, but as I got closer to the window, my stomach sank. Right outside my front yard, a group of men in neon vests were pounding wooden stakes into the ground, staking off a section of my driveway. "What the?" I muttered, sliding open the door. I threw on a t-shirt and walked out just in time to see one of them unloading a roll of yellow caution tape. "Excuse me," I called out, keeping my tone calm but firm. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" The guy looked up, clearly uncomfortable. We were told to mark off this area for property adjustment. HOA orders." I raised an eyebrow. "Property adjustment? You're on private land." Before I could say more, a familiar voice chimed in behind me. Well, looks like someone's awake." I turned around, and there she was. Karen, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, her son Chad trailing behind her with his phone already recording. "Morning, Sheriff," she said, her tone dripping with fake politeness. "Just conducting official HOA business." I crossed my arms. "You hired a crew to dig on my land without permission?" She smirked. "Correction, community land. After reviewing some updated documents, the HOA board agreed this portion of your property actually falls within our jurisdiction. So we're reclaiming it." "Reclaiming it?" I said, almost laughing. "Karen, this isn't a pirate movie. You don't just reclaim someone's yard." She ignored the jab. "The pool, fence, and patio extension are technically encroaching. Once this adjustment is complete, the HOA will be assuming maintenance responsibility. You'll thank us later." I took a step closer. "Let me make this very clear. You're trespassing, again. Those workers are about 5 feet onto my private property. You're about to violate 3 county ordinances and a state-level statute about unauthorized land alteration." Karen raised her chin, trying to look confident, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty. "We're within our rights. You can't stop an HOA enforcement order." I took my phone out and pressed record. "I can and I am." I turned toward the workers. "Gentlemen, my name's Sheriff Blake. You're currently trespassing on private property under false pretenses. I'm going to ask you once. Pack up your equipment and leave immediately." They froze. One of them looked at Karen. "Ma'am, you didn't say this was his property. Don't listen to him." Karen snapped. "He's trying to intimidate you." But the workers weren't having it. The lead guy rubbed the back of his neck. "Ma'am, if this guy's law enforcement, we're not getting involved in a property dispute. We're out." They started rolling up their tape. Karen panicked. "Wait. You're supposed to," but they were already walking off toward their truck. Karen spun toward me, furious. "You can't do this. You can't interfere with HOA projects." "Oh, I can interfere when you're breaking the law," I said, my voice low. "You just attempted illegal property seizure. Do you realize how serious that is?" Her face went pale, but pride wouldn't let her back down. "You're abusing your power," she shouted. "Karen, I haven't even used my power," I said, stepping forward. "Yet." For a moment, we just stared at each other, her eyes burning with self-righteous fury, mine cold and unblinking. Chad stopped recording and shifted uncomfortably. I pointed at him. "Son, I'd advise you to stop filming unless you want to document your mother committing a felony." He lowered his phone immediately. Karen crossed her arms, her voice shaking. "You think you can bully me because of your badge?" I shook my head slowly. No, Karen. I'm just reminding you that badges exist to protect people from you. That seemed to hit her. Her lips quivered, but she turned on her heel and stormed off, dragging Chad behind her. This isn't over, she shouted. You'll regret this. The HOA will not tolerate lawlessness. I watched her disappear around the corner, then took a deep breath and called my deputy, Ryan. Morning, boss, he answered. What's up? Got a weird one, I said. Neighbor just tried to seize part of my property using fake HOA paperwork. Might want to log an incident report, trespassing, attempted property fraud. There was a pause, then a chuckle. You're kidding. I wish I was, I said. And get this, she brought a contractor crew. Told them the HOA owned my land. Ryan laughed again. You can't make this stuff up. Want me to swing by? Not yet, I replied. Let's give her enough rope to hang herself first. But keep a unit nearby in case she tries something stupid. Copy that, Sheriff. After the call, I went back inside, poured myself another cup of coffee, and sat by the window. For a long time, I just watched her house across the street. Curtains drawn. No movement. But I knew she was watching me too. Karen wasn't the kind of person who could let a loss go. She was plotting her next move. And given her inflated sense of authority, it was only a matter of time before she tried to turn this into a full-blown war. Sure enough, that afternoon, I got a letter in my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded sheet of paper printed in bold. Notice of imminent community seizure. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action. You are hereby ordered to vacate all HOA-managed property, including but not limited to the swimming pool and adjacent recreational structures. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. She'd actually typed up her own version of an eminent domain notice. Unbelievable, I muttered. She's losing her mind. But I didn't toss it out this time. I tucked it neatly into my file, because now, Karen's game wasn't just petty harassment. It was official evidence. And I had a feeling I'd need every bit of it soon. As evening fell, the sky turned orange over Maple Crest. I stepped onto my patio, watching the reflection of the sunset ripple across my pool. The same pool that Karen was now convinced belonged to her. Somewhere across the street, her blinds moved, just a flicker. She was still watching. I smiled to myself. Keep digging, Karen, I whispered. You're about to find out what happens when you push the law too far. Because the next day, she wouldn't just send fake notices or workers. She'd call the police on me. And that was the moment this HOA feud turned into a full-on showdown. The next morning started quiet. Too quiet. Usually, weekends in Maple Crest meant kids riding bikes, sprinklers hissing, and someone inevitably mowing their lawn before 8 a.m. But that day, it was different. Still. Eerie. The kind of silence that tells you the storm's just waiting for its cue. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat out on the porch, enjoying what little peace I had left. Birds chirped in the distance, and for a moment, I thought maybe Karen had finally waved the white flag. Maybe the notice of imminent community seizure was her final act of madness. Then, at precisely 10:07 a.m., I saw them, 2 patrol cars rolling slowly down the street, lights flashing but sirens off. I blinked. You've got to be kidding me. The cars stopped right in front of my house. Neighbors peeked through curtains, phones already in hand, hungry for drama. Maple Crest loved a good scandal, and this one was about to make headlines on every gossip text thread in the community. I set my coffee down and stepped off the porch just as one of the officers, a young deputy named Ruiz, got out of the car. I recognized him instantly. Good kid. Only been on the force 6 months. Morning, deputy, I said casually. What brings you out here? He looked nervous. Sheriff Blake, we, got a call from a homeowner. She said there was a trespasser using HOA property without authorization. I smirked. Let me guess, Karen? He glanced at his partner, who gave a sheepish nod. Ruiz cleared his throat. She specifically said a male individual was occupying the HOA pool area and refusing to leave. I chuckled, shaking my head. And let me guess again, that pool would be the one directly behind my house? Yes, sir. I gestured toward my backyard. Well, come on then. Let's go check out this dangerous trespasser. The two deputies followed me through the gate. My pool glistened in the sunlight, peaceful as ever. No one there but me. I turned to them. So, what do you think, boys? Does this look like trespassing to you? They exchanged looks. Ruiz tried not to grin. No, sir. Looks like you're just on your property. Before I could respond, a shrill voice pierced the air from the other side of the fence. There. That's him. We turned. Karen was standing at the gate, arms crossed, clipboard in one hand and her phone in the other, already recording, of course. Chad stood beside her, smirking like he thought this was some courtroom drama he'd win on TikTok. Officers. Karen shouted. I demand you remove this man from HOA property immediately. Ruiz blinked, confused. Ma'am, that's Sheriff Blake. Karen didn't miss a beat. I don't care who he is. He's violating HOA rules by using a restricted amenity. This pool is part of community grounds. I sighed and rubbed my temple. Karen, we've been through this. The pool's on my land. You've seen the maps. The board's seen the maps. Everyone's seen the maps. That map was falsified, she snapped, waving her clipboard. We've already filed an appeal to reclaim the area under HOA jurisdiction. Until it's resolved, he has no right to be here. I turned to the deputies. You see what I'm dealing with? Ruiz looked like he wanted to melt into the ground. Ma'am, with all due respect, this property's deeded to Sheriff Blake. We confirmed it last time we were here. Karen narrowed her eyes. I don't believe that. You're protecting him because he's your boss. Her son laughed under his breath. Yeah, power trip much. That was enough. I stepped forward, calm but firm. Karen, you've now made a false police report, again. You've disrupted public resources, harassed officers, and trespassed on private land multiple times. You're lucky I haven't pressed charges yet. She gasped theatrically, clutching her chest. Are you threatening me? No, I said evenly. I'm warning you. The deputies stayed quiet. They didn't need to intervene. They knew I had this under control. Karen, though, wasn't backing down. She stomped closer, pointing her clipboard like a sword. This isn't over, Sheriff. You're abusing your authority to intimidate private citizens. I'll be filing an official complaint with the county board and the mayor if I have to. Go right ahead, I said, smiling slightly. You might want to mention how you called 911 to have the sheriff arrested in his own backyard. I'm sure they'll love that part. Her face turned bright red. For a second, I thought she might explode. But instead, she just hissed through her teeth. Enjoy your little pool while you can. The HOA will win this. Then she stormed off, dragging Chad by the wrist again, muttering about lawyers and cover-ups. Once they were gone, Ruiz let out a low whistle. Wow. She really doesn't know when to quit, huh? Not even close, I said, shaking my head. But I've dealt with worse than her. Paper bullies always fold when the real law shows up. The other deputy nodded. You want us to file this under false report? Yeah, I said. Document everything. I'll sign off later. They both nodded, still looking a little bewildered by the absurdity of it all, and drove off down the street. I stood by the pool, looking out at the water, thinking about how far this had gone. Karen wasn't just trying to flex her power anymore, she was obsessed. And people like her? They don't stop until something forces them to. Sure enough, by evening, an email hit my inbox from the HOA board. Subject line, urgent, formal complaint filed by board president Karen D. I opened it. The complaint was 6 pages long, accusing me of intimidation, trespassing, misuse of authority, and psychological harassment. She even attached screenshots of me standing in my own backyard, as if that was incriminating. I read it twice and couldn't help but laugh. The desperation was starting to show. She was grasping at straws. But one paragraph made me pause. Pending resolution, the HOA will request a temporary injunction to restrict access to disputed property areas, including the pool and patio space, until community ownership is clarified. That right there? That was a red line. She wasn't just trying to annoy me anymore. She was trying to use the system to legally lock me out of my own home. And that meant it was time to stop playing defense. So I opened a new file on my computer, labeled it Karen Case, HOA Harassment, and started compiling every piece of evidence I'd gathered: video footage, notices, false citations, meeting minutes, and now, a false police report. By the time I was done, the folder was thicker than her entire rulebook. I leaned back in my chair and muttered, "You wanted a legal battle, Karen? You just got one." Because the next step wasn't going to be a warning. It was going to be a court summons. And when that hammer dropped, even Karen wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. The crowd around my pool had grown. Neighbors lined the sidewalks, whispering, phones out, filming every second. Some of them were actually enjoying the show, while others looked nervous. No one wanted to cross Karen or her son. Chad was pacing near the edge of the pool, trying to maintain his alpha stance, while Karen clutched her phone like a sword, ready to call higher authorities. "Ma'am, I am the authority," I said firmly, still in my calm professional tone. "Now I suggest you and your son step off my property before this becomes official." Karen barked out a laugh, high-pitched and grating. "Oh please. You think I don't know the law? My brother-in-law is a lawyer, and he says the HOA has jurisdiction over all shared amenities in this subdivision. You don't even have the right to fence this pool without our approval." "Shared," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Ma'am, there's nothing shared about this pool. It was built before the HOA even existed. The fence, the tiles, the deck, every inch of it is on my land." She huffed, crossing her arms. "That's not what my son says." Chad nodded eagerly. "Yeah. My mom said we can use it if we want. So I'm gonna swim." He took one step toward the water, smirking like a cartoon villain, and that's when I decided playtime was over. "Stop right there," I said, pulling my badge from my pocket and holding it up so the sunlight caught the gold. "Sheriff's Department. You're both trespassing." The color drained from Karen's face. You're joking." "No, ma'am. I'm not." Chad froze mid-step, eyes wide. "Wait, you're a cop." "Not just a cop," I said evenly. "The county sheriff. The same one whose department your HOA calls every other week to complain about grass heights and parking violations." A few of the neighbors gasped. I could hear the collective murmur ripple through the group. Someone whispered, "I told you he looked familiar." Karen stammered, her fake confidence crumbling like a sandcastle. Well, you can't just—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted. "You're on private property without permission. That's trespassing under state law, Section 30.05. You've been repeatedly told to leave. Now you can walk off peacefully, or I can escort you off." Karen blinked rapidly, clearly torn between pride and panic. She looked around for backup from the neighbors, but no one moved. Not one person was willing to side with her now. I didn't know," she finally mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. "I believe you," I said, stepping closer, my voice calm but commanding. "But here's the thing, you didn't ask. You assumed. And then you sent your son to harass me on my own property. That's not a misunderstanding, that's entitlement." Chad shifted awkwardly, staring down at his sneakers. "I just thought," he muttered, "I didn't know you were—" "It doesn't matter who I am," I said, my tone softening slightly. "What matters is respect. You don't talk to adults that way. You don't threaten to kick someone out of their own pool." Karen opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "No. Don't apologize yet. Save it for the HOA board meeting next week, because I'll be there." Her eyes widened again. "Why would you be there?" "Because," I said with a half-smile, "the sheriff's office has been getting complaints about harassment, unauthorized citations, and attempted enforcement of fake bylaws. I was planning to look into it quietly, but after today, I think I'll handle it personally." The murmuring among the neighbors turned into excited whispers. A few people actually smiled. It was clear that Karen's reign of petty terror was finally cracking. Karen huffed again, her face blotchy red. "You can't, this is harassment. I'll report you." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Just make sure you spell my name right. It's on the badge." For a long silent moment, all I could hear was the sound of the water gently rippling behind me. Then finally, Karen turned on her heel and stormed off, dragging Chad by the arm. The crowd slowly dispersed, still buzzing with the shock of what they'd witnessed. As I gathered my towel, one of my neighbors, a quiet man named Tom from 2 doors down, approached me, grinning. "Sheriff, I've lived here 6 years, and I've waited 6 years to see someone finally stand up to her." I chuckled. "Glad I could help make your Sunday more entertaining." He laughed. "You just made everyone's week." I nodded, watching Karen's SUV speed off down the road. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because if I knew Karen, and I did, she'd be plotting her next move before she even reached her driveway. And this time, she'd come back with reinforcements. By Monday morning, my peaceful weekend was just a memory. The pool water was calm again, but the gossip in the neighborhood wasn't. Every porch, every sidewalk, every social media group for our subdivision was buzzing about the sheriff versus Karen showdown. Apparently, someone's video of the incident had made its way into the local community forum, and it had gone viral in record time. The title read, "HOA Queen Tries to Kick Sheriff Out of His Own Pool. Guess Who Gets Kicked Out Instead?" By the time I drove to the sheriff's office, my deputies were already chuckling about it. "Boss, you're famous," my deputy James said, grinning. "Karen from Willow Oaks tried to evict you? From your pool?" "Yeah, well," I sighed, setting down my coffee. "Let's just say she's creative." But what I didn't know was that Karen wasn't licking her wounds, she was rallying her troops. By mid-afternoon, a new email from the HOA board hit every homeowner's inbox. The subject line read, "Urgent Community Notice, Law Enforcement Intimidation Incident." Oh, I knew right then this was going to be good. I opened the message and almost laughed out loud. The letter was written in Karen's overdramatic tone, accusing me of using my badge to bully residents and creating an unsafe environment at a shared community amenity. She even claimed I had verbally threatened her teenage son, a minor, and misused public authority for personal gain. And right at the bottom, she'd added her favorite line, "The HOA will be holding an emergency board meeting to discuss disciplinary action against this behavior." I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. "Disciplinary action," I muttered. "Against the county sheriff." "Sure, Karen." That evening, as the sun dipped low, I saw a few HOA members gathering at her house. They came in clusters, clipboard carriers, self-appointed rule enforcers, and a few of the same people who'd filmed her meltdown the other day. Chad was there too, still sulking but clearly enjoying the attention. I stayed quiet for now. Sometimes, the best way to deal with people like Karen is to let them dig their own hole. The next day, a folded notice appeared in my mailbox, stamped urgent, HOA business. Inside was a formal summons to the emergency meeting. It was scheduled for Wednesday night at the community clubhouse. The tone was as dramatic as ever. "Failure to appear will result in escalation to the appropriate legal channels." I laughed so hard my dog barked. I could just picture Karen imagining me quivering in fear over her printed notice. Wednesday came, and I showed up early, not to cause a scene, but because I wanted everything on record. The clubhouse was already full, chairs lined up in rows, with Karen sitting at the head of the table like she was running the Supreme Court. Chad sat next to her, his sunglasses perched on his head despite being indoors. The moment I walked in, the murmurs started. Some people smiled, others looked uncomfortable. Karen straightened her blouse and banged a gavel on the table. Yes, she'd actually brought one. "Order. Order," she declared. "We are here to address the concerning incident involving Sheriff Daniels, who, despite his position, has violated multiple HOA regulations and used intimidation tactics against board members." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, calm as ever. "Karen, I'm here as requested," I said. "But before we proceed, I need to make one thing clear. I'm attending as a homeowner, not in uniform, not representing the county." "Understood?" She squinted, trying to sound official. "Understood for now." She flipped a paper dramatically. "First violation, use of a restricted community facility without board approval." "That would be my pool," I said. "On my private property." Several people in the audience snorted or whispered to each other. One guy in the back even muttered, "She's really doing this, huh?" Karen ignored them. "Second violation, verbal harassment of a minor." "You mean your son yelling at me to get off my own land?" Her face turned a shade redder. "He was defending community property." "Which isn't community property," I reminded her. "As verified by the property plat filed with the county registrar. Would you like a copy?" I brought 10. I reached into my folder and held up the official document. You could hear a pin drop. Karen sputtered, flipping through her notes. That's irrelevant. No, I said, that's the law. And since you mentioned legal channels, let's make something else clear. Issuing false citations, trespassing, and attempting to enforce non-existent bylaws are crimes. If I were a different man, you'd both be facing charges. Chad shifted in his seat, clearly wishing he could disappear. Karen tried to salvage her pride. You can't talk to me like that. I'm the acting HOA president. I smiled. And I'm the sheriff. Which means if you or anyone else tries to pull something like this again, I'll handle it the same way I handle any other case, by the book. The room broke into low murmurs again. Some nodded in agreement. Others, who'd clearly suffered under Karen's petty rulings, actually clapped quietly. Finally, one of the other board members, a middle-aged woman named Susan, spoke up. Karen, maybe we should take a step back. It sounds like there's been a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Karen snapped. He humiliated me in front of the neighborhood. Susan folded her arms. You humiliated yourself, Karen. That did it. The room broke into scattered applause. Karen's face went crimson as she slammed her gavel again, but the damage was done. The board officially voted to table her complaints pending review, which was their polite way of saying no one was buying it. As the meeting ended, I stood up, nodding to Susan. Appreciate your level head, I said quietly. She smiled. About time someone stood up to her. Outside, the cool night air hit my face. I could see Karen storming to her car, Chad trailing behind, yelling something about lawyer up. But I knew something they didn't. The HOA wasn't done crumbling yet, because the county office had just started investigating their misuse of power. And when the truth came out, Karen's little empire would collapse for good. The next morning started like any other. I brewed a pot of coffee, stepped out to grab the newspaper, and watched the sunrise cast a warm glow across my quiet street. But beneath that calm, I knew things were about to change, because Karen had pushed one fight too far. By 9 a.m., I received a call from the county attorney's office. Sheriff Daniels, the voice said, we've received multiple reports about your HOA, harassment, misuse of fines, even forgery of notices. You familiar with that? I couldn't help but smile. Familiar enough, I said. Let's just say I've had a front row seat. Good, the attorney replied. We're opening an investigation. Would you mind providing your statement? I agreed instantly. And within hours, the wheels were in motion. By midweek, 2 county investigators showed up in the neighborhood, plain clothes, but anyone could tell they weren't here for a bake sale. They started knocking on doors, collecting stories from homeowners. And boy, did they get an earful. Turns out, Karen's leadership had left a trail of misery longer than anyone realized. One elderly couple said she fined them $150 for planting non-compliant flowers. Another man explained how she'd threatened to tow his car for parking in his own driveway because it faced the wrong direction. A young mother broke down in tears, saying she was charged for unauthorized Halloween decorations. And then there was the kicker. Several residents claimed Karen and 2 other board members had been pocketing money from HOA fees, funneling it into beautification projects that never existed. When I heard that part, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything exploded. That Friday, the HOA held what they called a special closed meeting. Karen showed up dressed like she was running for governor. Crisp blazer, pearl earrings, and that same smug smile she'd worn the day she tried to evict me from my pool. But she didn't know I'd been invited too, by the county investigator herself. As I walked into the clubhouse, every conversation stopped. Karen's face dropped the instant she saw who was standing beside me, Investigator Rachel Morris, one of the toughest auditors in the county. Karen tried to recover, offering her fake sweet tone. Sheriff Daniels, what a surprise. I didn't realize law enforcement was attending this private meeting. This isn't a private meeting anymore, Rachel said coolly. We're conducting a formal review of HOA operations. Please take your seat, Mrs. Whitmore. The way Rachel said Mrs. Whitmore made the whole room go silent. You could practically feel Karen's composure cracking. Rachel started pulling out files. We've reviewed the HOA's financial records, she said, her voice steady and professional. Several discrepancies caught our attention: payments that don't match deposits, vendor contracts that don't exist, and personal expenditures made with HOA funds. Karen immediately went on the defensive. That's nonsense. Those were all legitimate expenses. Rachel looked unimpressed. Would you care to explain the $3,200 payment for landscaping services made to an account registered under your son's name? Chad, who was sitting quietly near the back, nearly choked on his soda. What? Mom, what did you? Karen hissed at him, not now, Chad. But it was too late. The room erupted in whispers. Homeowners leaned toward each other, murmuring. For the first time, the boardroom energy wasn't in Karen's control, it was against her. Susan, the same board member who'd stood up for me last time, raised her hand. I'd like to motion for Karen to be suspended as HOA president pending investigation. Another neighbor chimed in, seconded. Karen's jaw dropped. You can't do this to me. I built this HOA. I've kept this community in order while the rest of you sat back. I stepped forward. And while you did that, you abused your neighbors, falsified rules, and tried to intimidate people with made-up authority. She turned on me, eyes blazing. You turned everyone against me. If you hadn't moved here, everything would still be fine. I met her glare evenly. No, Karen. If you'd respected people's rights, you would still be fine. Rachel nodded toward me, then addressed the room. Given the volume of evidence and testimonies, Karen Whitmore and her son are officially under investigation for fraud and misuse of HOA funds. Karen's face drained of color. You can't arrest me. Not today, Rachel replied. But I wouldn't make any big plans for the weekend. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Karen's authority, her power, her control, evaporated right there. Chad slumped in his chair, realizing the party was over. Within a week, the county froze the HOA's accounts and appointed a temporary oversight committee. The news spread fast. Neighbors who'd avoided eye contact with me before were now stopping by to shake my hand. Thank you, Sheriff, one man said. We thought she was untouchable. She's not anymore, I replied. No one is when they cross the law. Even the local paper ran a headline, HOA president under investigation for fraud after attempting to evict sheriff. By the end of the month, the investigation was complete. Karen was charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying records. She tried to spin it, of course, blaming bookkeeping errors and miscommunication, but the evidence was too strong. When she finally moved out of the neighborhood, it was quiet. No speeches, no grand farewells. Just a U-Haul truck at dawn and the sound of tires fading down the street. The HOA was rebuilt under new leadership, a fair, transparent board that focused on real community improvement, not control. One Saturday, as I floated in my pool again, this time with no interruptions, I saw Susan walking her dog. She waved from across the fence. Feels peaceful again, doesn't it? She said. I smiled. Yeah. Finally. The sun glimmered on the water, the scent of barbecue filled the air, and for the first time in months, it felt like home again. Peace, real peace. Not the kind the HOA enforced, but the kind you earn after standing up for what's right. And as I leaned back in my chair, watching the ripples move across my pool, I couldn't help but think, sometimes, justice doesn't come with sirens or handcuffs. Sometime.